The mist clung to the Blue Ridge Mountains that autumn morning, weaving through ancient oaks and maples ablaze with fall colors. Nathan Raines paused on the observation deck, coffee in hand, and listened. Something was wrong. 38 years of life, 15 of those spent rehabilitating wounded creatures, had given him an acute sensitivity to the language of the wild. This morning, the forest had gone silent. No chirping warblers announcing territory. No squirrels scratching at bark. Not even the distant huffs of the bison herd that typically echoed across the valley at dawn. Nathan set his mug down on the weathered railing of his cabin. The Blue Ridge Sanctuary was a 5-acre semi-wild ecological preserve in northern Georgia, home to rescued animals that couldn't survive in true wilderness. Some had been circus performers, others exotic pets abandoned when they grew too large or aggressive. Many were casualties of poaching operations, orphaned or wounded. All carried the invisible scars of human intervention. Most of the animals roamed free within carefully maintained territories. Nathan and his team monitored them but interfered minimally, letting nature heal what humans had broken. He slipped on his boots and field jacket, running fingers through his salt and pepper hair. The lines around his eyes had deepened since he'd left his veterinary position with the Army Rangers 7 years ago. War had taught him about wounds both visible and hidden. The animals understood this about him, somehow. "Radio check," he spoke into his handheld. "Something's off this morning. I'm doing an unscheduled patrol of the southern quadrant." "Copy that," came Eliza's voice, his head ranger. "Want company?" "Not yet. Could be nothing." But it wasn't nothing. 15 years in wildlife rehabilitation had taught him that silence in nature always meant something was happening, something important. The Southern Quadrant housed their most intelligent Residenza family group of rescued gorillas relocated from a failing zoo in Cincinnati, and several solitary great apes rescued from illegal trafficking operations. The primates maintained a loose community, with clear territories but frequent, peaceful interactions. The mist parted as Nathan rounded the curve of the mountain trail. There, sitting perfectly still on a boulder overlooking the valley, was Kuma. The silverback gorilla had been among the sanctuary's first residents. Rescued from poachers in the Congo 7 years earlier as a young adult, he had arrived traumatized and aggressive. Nathan had personally overseen his rehabilitation, spending countless silent hours just sitting near his enclosure until the great ape had finally acknowledged him with something other than rage. Now, Kuma was the unofficial sentinel of the Southern Territory's peaceful unless provoked, generally avoiding human contact except for Nathan. But today, Kuma looked different. His massive frame was tense, shoulders hunched forward, eyes focused on something in the distance. He had ignored the morning fruit provisions left at his feeding station. "Hey, big guy," Nathan said softly, maintaining a respectful distance. Kuma turned, his deep amber eyes finding Nathan's. There was no aggression there, but something Nathan had rarely seen in the gorilla's expression: urgency. The silverback made a series of short, huffing sounds, then stood on his hind legs, reaching nearly 6 feet tall. Nathan remained still, reading the gorilla's body language. This wasn't a threat display, it was communication. Kuma dropped back to all fours and took several deliberate steps down the trail, then stopped and looked back at Nathan. The meaning was unmistakable. "Follow me." In 7 years, Kuma had never done this. The protocol was clear: staff didn't follow animals into the deeper territories. But Nathan also understood that sometimes protocol couldn't account for everything that happened in a place where the wild and human worlds intersected. "I'm following Kuma into the Eastern Valley," he radioed to base. "Have medical standing by just in case something's wrong." Kuma led him down paths that Nathan rarely traveled, deeper into the mist-shrouded forest. The gorilla moved with purpose, occasionally looking back to ensure Nathan kept pace. They descended into a moss-covered ravine where sunlight filtered through in ethereal beams, illuminating patches of fern and wildflowers. Then Kuma stopped, and made a low, rumbling sound in his chest. Nathan saw it then a massive form lying on its side amid the ferns, tawny coat almost golden in the dappled light. A male lion. Not just any lion, the largest in their care. Raka. 2. Fallen king. The lion lay perfectly still except for the labored rise and fall of his ribcage. His magnificent mane was matted with mud and leaves, and his right foreleg was caught in what appeared to be a steel trap, the rusty metal teeth buried deep in flesh and likely bone. Blood had soaked into the moss beneath him, dark and ominous. Nathan's mind raced. Poachers. They must have breached the eastern perimeter overnight, setting illegal traps. The thought made his blood boil, but now wasn't the time for anger. Base, I need the veterinary team and security at my GPS location immediately. We have Raka down with a serious leg injury. Poachers trap. And tell them to hurry. What happened next defied everything Nathan thought he understood about animal behavior. Kuma approached the injured lion slowly. In any other circumstance, these two apex predators would never interact this way. Lions and gorillas weren't natural enemies in the wild simply because they didn't share territories, but neither would they seek each other's company. The silverback stopped a meter from Raka and sat down, his massive frame somehow conveying both power and gentleness. The lion's amber eyes, glazed with pain, fixed on the gorilla. There was no fear, no aggression, only a strange recognition. Raka made a soft sound, somewhere between a groan and a purr. Kuma responded with a low hum that vibrated in his chest. They were communicating. Nathan kept his distance, transfixed by the scene before him. The gorilla extended one massive hand, not quite touching the lion but holding it palm out in a gesture that seemed almost familiar. Raka struggled to lift his head slightly, looking at the offered hand. "My God," Nathan whispered. Memory struck him like lightning. 6 years earlier, when the sanctuary was still establishing its rehabilitation protocols, they had received an orphaned lion cub Raka found beside his poached mother in Tanzania. At the same time, Kuma was still in the final stages of his own rehabilitation. The two enclosures had been adjacent during that time. Nathan had documented their interactions but had forgotten the details until this moment. The young gorilla and lion cub had developed a peculiar ritual of greeting each other through the fence. Kuma would tap rhythmically on the barrier, and eventually the lion cub had mimicked the behavior. Staff had found it fascinating, but ultimately inconsequential. When Raka was strong enough, he had been moved to the larger felid enclosure before eventually being released into the sanctuary's semi-wild territories. The brief friendship had been filed away and forgotten. But Raka hadn't forgotten, and neither had Kuma. The sound of the approaching medical team broke the spell. Kuma looked up at the humans rushing down the path with stretchers and equipment, then back at Nathan. There was an unmistakable intelligence in those eyes, concern, trust, and expectation. "Fix him." "We'll take care of him," Nathan promised, not feeling foolish at all for speaking directly to the gorilla. "You found him in time." The veterinary team worked quickly, sedating Raka to remove the cruel trap and assess the damage. The foreleg was badly mangled, but not beyond repair. Throughout the procedure, Kuma remained nearby, sitting sentinel on a rocky outcropping 20 meters away, watching every movement with intense focus. "Has he been there the whole time?" asked Dr. Maya Chen, the sanctuary's head veterinarian, nodding toward the silverback. "He's the one who found Raka," Nathan explained, helping her clean the wound. "More than Thaith came to get me, deliberately led me here." Maya's hands stilled momentarily. "That's unusual behavior." "It gets stranger," Nathan said, recounting the interaction he'd witnessed between the two animals. "I think they know each other, from years ago." "Memory across species boundaries?" Maya raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Sounds like you're anthropomorphizing." "Maybe," Nathan conceded. "Or maybe we underestimate them." Awakening memories. The following days brought a flurry of activity. Security patrols were doubled, and the perimeter fencing underwent comprehensive inspection. 3 illegal hunting traps were discovered and removed. Nathan had filed reports with local authorities and the Fish and Wildlife Service. Raka was recovering in the medical compound, a spacious enclosure with natural features but close enough to the clinic for regular monitoring. The damage had been severe. 3 surgeries had been required to remove trap fragments embedded in bone, repair torn tendons, and prevent infection. The lion would likely always walk with a limp, but he would survive. What continued to puzzle the staff was Kuma's behavior. Every morning at dawn, the silverback would appear at the edge of the forest line, precisely at the point nearest to the medical compound. He would sit, sometimes for hours, gazing in the direction of the recovering lion. When staff approached, he would retreat into the trees but never go far. "He's maintaining a vigil," Nathan told the assembled team during their weekly meeting. "I've never seen anything like it." "Gorillas are known to guard their dead," offered Eliza, scrolling through research on her tablet. "But guarding another species? There's no precedent for that." "I don't think he's guarding," Nathan said slowly. "I think he's visiting." That evening, after most staff had gone home, Nathan found himself reviewing old files. The sanctuary maintained detailed records on all residents' medical histories, behavioral observations, socialization attempts. He pulled up the archives from 6 years earlier, searching for anything about the young Kuma and baby Raka. There it was, a forgotten folder of observation notes and videos. The footage was grainy by modern standards, but clear enough. A juvenile gorilla and a lion cub separated by a mesh fence. The video showed Kuma approaching the barrier, tapping his knuckles against it in a distinct pattern. On the other side, the small lion watching intently, then raising his paw and batting at the fence in response. The next clip showed them a week later, the pattern more complex, the response more immediate. They had developed a language of sorts. Another video. Kuma pushing pieces of fruit through the mesh, Raka sniffing them, then pushing small pebbles back through the openings offerings exchanged. Nathan sat back, rubbing his tired eyes. The evidence was there, documented but dismissed as cute anomalous behavior rather than meaningful interaction. No one had considered what might happen if these two remembered each other years later. The following morning, Nathan made a decision. Against protocol and several strongly worded objections from his staff, he arranged for a controlled interaction. Raka, still recovering but alert, was resting in an outdoor recovery pina grassy enclosure with a shaded area and heating pads for comfort. Nathan had the area cleared of all personnel except for Maya, who stood ready with tranquilizer equipment if needed. At Nathan's signal, a section of special fencing was rolled into place similar to the mesh barrier that had separated the two animals years ago. "Are you sure about this?" Maya asked, tension evident in her voice. "No," Nathan admitted, "but I think it matters." They retreated to the observation blind and waited. An hour passed before Kuma emerged from the tree line, approaching cautiously. He stopped several times, scenting the air, before continuing toward the mesh barrier. Raka, who had been dozing, lifted his massive head. His nostrils flared as he caught Kuma's scent. For a terrifying moment, Nathan feared he had catastrophically misread the situation, that natural instincts would override any old memories, that they would see each other as threats. The lion struggled to his feet, favoring his injured leg heavily. He limped toward the barrier, golden eyes fixed on the gorilla. They stopped, a meter apart, separated by the mesh. Silence stretched between them, two kings from different realms facing each other across an artificial divide. Then Kuma lifted his right hand and tapped the mesh barrier, once, twice, 3 times in deliberate sequence. Nathan held his breath. Raka studied the gorilla for what seemed an eternity. Then, slowly, he raised his uninjured paw and tapped the barrier in response. The same pattern, a code forgotten by humans but remembered by animals. "My God," whispered Maya. They remember, Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. They remember each other. IV, the bond beyond species. Word spread quickly through the wildlife conservation community. A gorilla and lion that recognized each other after years of separation challenged fundamental assumptions about animal cognition and cross-species relationships. Researchers requested permission to observe. Donors suddenly found new interest in the sanctuary's work. Nathan approved limited research protocols, but kept the interactions private, protected from becoming a spectacle. This wasn't an exhibition, was a reunion. As Raka's strength returned, the staff established a routine. Each morning, the mesh barrier would be placed between a portion of the recovery enclosure and the forest edge. Kuma would appear, sometimes bringing items interesting stones, colorful leaves, once even a bird feather ant set them by the barrier. Raka would drag branches or push moss toward the mesh with his good paw. They would sit for hours, sometimes exchanging their peculiar tapping communication, sometimes simply being in each other's presence. It's like they're catching up, Eliza remarked one day, observing from a distance, telling each other what they've missed. Nathan had begun developing a proposal, a controversial one, that he knew would face significant resistance from the board and possibly regulatory agencies. The sanctuary had been designed with distinct territories for different species, maintaining ecological balance while allowing natural behaviors. What Nathan was considering would challenge those carefully established boundaries. 3 weeks into Raka's recovery, as Nathan was finalizing his proposal in the main office, the sanctuary's alarm system blared to life. Red warning lights flashed on the security monitors. "Perimeter breach, south quadrant," called the security officer on duty. "Motion sensors triggered in sequence. Someone's moving fast through Sector 7. Nathan grabbed his radio and emergency kit. Lock down the medical facilities. Get rangers to the endangered species enclosures. These might be the same poachers back for another attempt. He rushed toward his vehicle, but Eliza's voice crackled over the radio. "Nathan, Kuma's group is moving toward the breach. Point all of them." It's like they're responding to the intrusion. Nathan changed direction, heading toward the southern forest instead. If poachers encountered territorial gorillas, the situation could turn deadly for humans and animals alike. The forest was eerily active as he rushed down the trail. Birds scattered in alarm, and the undergrowth rustled with fleeing smaller creatures. Nathan heard shouts in the distance, then a sound that froze his blood, the distinctive roar of a male lion. "Raka's out!" came Maya's panicked voice over the radio. "He broke through the side panel of the recovery pen when the alarm sounded." Nathan crested a ridge and stopped short at the scene below. 3 men in camouflage gear were backed against the rocky face of a small cliff. Before them stood Kuma, his massive silverback frame erect in full threat display, flanked by 2 younger male gorillas. The poachers held machetes, one pointing a tranquilizer gun with shaking hands. And there was Raka, limping but powerful, approaching from the other side, effectively cutting off the poacher's escape route. The lion's muscles bunched beneath his tawny coat, his mane seeming to double in size as he snarled. The gorillas and lion weren't fighting each other. They were coordinating. "Hold your fire!" Nathan shouted to the sanctuary rangers arriving behind him. "Weapons ready! Don't shoot!" One of the poachers panicked, firing the tranquilizer dart wildly. It missed Kuma but struck one of the younger gorillas, who staggered back with a pained howl. Kuma roared, a sound rarely heard from gorillas, reserved for moments of extreme threat or distress. He pounded his chest, then charged forward several paces before stopping, more warning than attack. The poachers broke, trying to scramble up the rocky slope behind them. 2 made it halfway up before sanctuary rangers intercepted them from above. The third slipped, falling back toward the animals. Nathan's heart stopped as the man landed directly between Raka and Kuma. The lion crouched, ready to pounce. The poacher screamed, covering his head with his arms in futile protection. "Raka, no," Nathan called, knowing how useless human commands were in such a moment of primal tension. But it was Kuma who intervened. The silverback moved forward not toward the poacher, but toward Raka, positioning his massive body between predator and prey. The gorilla made a series of grunting sounds, chest heaving. Impossibly, Raka backed down. The lion's posture relaxed, though his eyes remained fixed on the terrified poacher. Sanctuary rangers rushed in, securing the man while Nathan approached the animals cautiously. Neither Raka nor Kuma retreated. They stood their ground, watching as the poachers were led away in handcuffs. When the chaos subsided, Nathan found himself alone with the improbable allies. The younger gorillas had retreated with the effects of the tranquilizer setting in. Medical staff would track and treat the affected animal. "You two," Nathan said softly, maintaining a safe distance, "you've upended everything we thought we knew." Kuma turned his intelligent gaze toward Nathan, then deliberately extended his hand toward Raka. The lion limped forward and, in a gesture that Nathan knew would haunt him forever, gently pressed his massive head against the gorilla's open palm. Where kings remember. The dual king's habitat proposal caused exactly the uproar Nathan had anticipated. The board called it reckless. Regulatory agencies demanded extensive safety protocols, and fellow wildlife managers across the country labeled it a dangerous experiment. "We're not running a circus," argued the sanctuary's most senior board member during the heated video conference. "These are wild animals with instincts that have evolved over millions of years. One moment of friendly behavior doesn't override nature." "With respect," Nathan countered, displaying video evidence of Kuma and Raka's continued interactions, "this isn't momentary. This is consistent, deliberate social behavior across species boundaries. And it's not just anthropomorphic projection. We have documented evidence of mutual protection, communication, and recognition." The debate raged for weeks. Meanwhile, Raka had been returned to a larger recovery habitat, and Kuma had refused to return to his normal territories, camping stubbornly at the edge of the forest nearest to the lion. It was Dr. Chen who finally tipped the scales in Nathan's favor during the final approval meeting. "The scientific value alone justifies the experiment," she argued. "But beyond that, we have to consider quality of life. Both animals are exhibiting signs of distress when separated. If our mission is truly about rehabilitation and well-being, we need to acknowledge that well-being might look different than our preconceived categories." 3 months later, the Dual King's habitat opened a 20-acre enclosure with varied terrain including forest edge, rocky outcroppings, and a small stream. Carefully designed to meet the needs of both species while allowing for safe separation if needed, it featured multiple retreat spaces and observation blinds that wouldn't disturb the animals. The introduction day arrived with tense anticipation. Staff were positioned strategically around the habitat with tranquilizer equipment, though Nathan prayed they wouldn't need it. Raka was released first, given time to explore and mark territory. The lion moved with increasing confidence, his injured leg much improved, though still bearing the permanent reminder of his brush with human cruelty. 2 hours later, the gate to Kuma's temporary enclosure was opened. The silverback emerged cautiously, scenting the air. He spotted Raka. Immediately, the lion was perched regally atop a flat boulder that caught the morning sun, his golden mane luminous in the light. Kuma moved forward at an unhurried pace. The observing staff held their breath collectively as the distance between the animals closed. Raka rose to his feet, watching the approaching gorilla. There was a moment of stillness between them two wild souls, each carrying scars inflicted by human hands, each finding in the other something that defied evolutionary logic. Then Raka did something extraordinary. He lowered his massive head in a gesture that, in lion behavior, signified submission, not fear, but respect. Kuma approached and, with surprising gentleness, placed his hand atop Raka's mane in what could only be described as a gesture of affection. In the observation blind, Nathan felt moisture on his cheeks and didn't bother to wipe it away. "Memory," he whispered to himself, Not just instinct, they remember. Over the following months, the dual kings became the sanctuary's most studied residents. Researchers documented behaviors never before seen between different mammal species in non-domestic settings: coordinated patrolling of territory, food sharing, and, most remarkably, what appeared to be deliberate teaching. Kuma would demonstrate tool use to crack nuts or extract insects, and Raka would observe with focused attention. They slept near each other during midday rest periods, Kuma often settling against a tree while Raka stretched out nearby. At night, they retreated to their preferred shelters, Kuma to the trees, Raka to a rock overhang, maintaining the natural rhythms of their species while sharing territory. The sanctuary received unprecedented attention from the scientific community. Papers were published, grants secured. The story of the gorilla and lion who remembered each other captured public imagination, bringing awareness to wildlife conservation efforts globally. 1 year after the habitat's creation, Nathan sat in his favorite observation blind, watching the unlikely friends sharing the last golden light of sunset. Raka was sprawled contentedly on a flat rock, eyes half closed in feline satisfaction. Kuma sat nearby, methodically sorting through berries he had collected. "What do you think they see in each other?" asked Eliza, who had joined him for the evening observation shift. Nathan considered the question carefully. "Recognition," he finally said, "not just of each other as individuals, but recognition of something shared beyond species. They both know what it means to be injured, to be displaced, to lose family, and they both know what it means to heal." "You think animals understand all that?" "I think we've only scratched the surface of what animals understand," Nathan replied. "Look at them two kings of different realms who found something more important than territory or instinct." "And what's that?" Eliza asked. Nathan watched as Kuma extended his hand in their familiar greeting, and Raka lifted his massive paw in response, their ritual of remembrance performed as the day's light faded into dusk. "Companionship," he said softly, "the knowledge that you are seen and remembered by another soul. Maybe that matters to all living things, not just humans." As darkness settled over the Blue Ridge Mountains, the gorilla and lion remained side by side, silhouettes against the deepening blue of twilight, two kings remembering across boundaries of species and time, rewriting what humans thought they knew about the capacity of animals to forge bonds beyond nature's blueprint. In their friendship, something profound and wordless was being spoken in the language only their hearts understood, that some connections transcend the categories we create to separate living things from one another. That memory and recognition can bridge even the widest divides, that sometimes the wild knows better than we do what healing truly requires. And in the quiet forest where kings remembered each other, that lesson continued to unfold beneath the watching stars. The end.